reason that I'm here is because the club is seeking change.
He said, well, whether you come or not, you're going to see a completely different Spurs team under me.
My hope and my desire and what I'm going to try and do is give our supporters hope and belief that we're going to embark on something special.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. This is episode 208, and we have entered the month of December where it is going to be very, very busy for Spurs, very, very busy for the Depot. We've got a lot to talk about on today's episode. I've got Scott alongside. He is at Scotchy Bird. Scott, what is up, my man? I know it has been a busy December already for you as well.
Yeah, Iowa State's in the Big 12 championship, so I don't really care about Spurs. But as we say, I'm here so I don't get fined. But yeah, looking forward to chatting Tottenham with you. I
am glad that you provided the Iowa State update before I even asked for it, because I was going to ask for it. I know that you've been very excited about your Cyclones and advancing, and they'll have a shot to be in the college football playoff, which is kind of cool. So yep. Good for them. We got a couple of games to talk about, a couple of, I guess you would call, disappointing draws to discuss for Tottenham Hotspur this week. No women's match this week. They are on the international break. Of course, we got to see the U.S. women and England's women play at Wembley on Saturday. Did you catch any of that match? I didn't actually see any of it.
I caught bits and pieces of it. I had it on while I was doing some other things around the house. But yeah, I thought it was super awesome to see Jess Naz get a start. It looks like she's continuing to impress Serena Weigman and will continue to be a part of the England setup from a Spurs perspective. And I think from the U.S. women's perspective, we are a U.S.-based pod. I would say that they continue to show that why am I drawing a blank on our manager's name, who is very well known to me?
Emma Hayes.
Thank you. Emma Hayes is continuing to layer in the tactics and continuing to implement more and more of the in-depth nature of the way that she wants her teams to play. So it's nice to see that continuing to take shape, and a handful of debuts from young players yesterday too, who all looked really good in their own right and capacity. So yeah, anyway, super exciting time for the U.S. women. And like I said, really happy to see Jess Naz continue to earn minutes and starts for England. That's wonderful.
It was really cool. Can you tell I'm avoiding talking about men's Spurs? I'm just putting it off as long as I can.
Yeah, we can.
The men's team, because I just don't. I don't really want to. Before we do get into talking about the men's team, I do want to tell everyone that we are delighted to be partnered with Digital Spurs. If you're watching on our YouTube page, you can see Scott and I are actually rocking the same exact hat, just in different colors today, a Tottenham golf hat done by Digital Spurs. Our guy Danny Garrison creates these pieces, which we do very much appreciate and love. Head to digitalspurs.com for Tottenham merch, including t-shirts, hoodies, crew necks, hats, and more. I know Danny's running some Black Friday specials this weekend, so if you hear this before the weekend is up, get over there, get some discounts. Great holiday gift ideas over at Digital Spurs. If you've got a Tottenham fan in your life, go over to digitalspurs.com, grab some gear, and let them know that we here at the Tottenham Depot sent you. Scott, we were chatting a little bit before we started recording, and we're like, where do we want to start? These are two matches that we need to discuss here that are kind of have similar themes. They're disappointing home draws, one in Europe, one in the Premier League. I figure we should just do this chronologically. And I guess the thing to kind of start with is the fact that Fraser Forster is our goalkeeper now, because we learned after the Man City match last week that unfortunately Guglielmo Vicario fractured his ankle and had to undergo surgery and is going to be out until, it sounds like, sometime in February, maybe at the earliest. So that is kind of the headline of the week, if you will. So Fraser Forster is this team's new goalkeeper. We're going to have a little bit more of a discussion about the goalkeeper position after we talk about these two results. But what is your kind of takeaway from Tottenham Hotspur 2, Roma 2? This was if you take like the grand scheme of the week, this was the more disappointing result, I think, for me, just because this match was in control. Spurs, I think, outplayed Roma, and then to give up a stoppage time equalizer was super disheartening. This match was played on Thanksgiving here in the States, so obviously for you and I, we were probably a little bit distracted with family and such. Lot to kind of go off of. But in the grand scheme, this was a disappointing result for me because Spurs had a real opportunity to put their stamp on a top 8 place in the Europa League with a victory here, and instead they dropped 2 points at home to Roma.
Yeah, very disappointing. Roma is not a good side right now at all. They sit 12th in Serie A on their third manager of the season in Claudio Ranieri, which, he's a very talented manager, and you do expect some sort of bounce or pickup from a new manager coming in. It's not just, not just a trope that we use as soccer fans. It tends to be a real thing that happens. So, I think knowing the Spurs are incredibly inconsistent and tend to come up short in matches that they should on paper win pretty handily, I think it was a recipe for a poor result, which I consider this to be a very poor result. So yeah, very, very disappointing. The long and the short of it for me is what I just mentioned, that just another example of Spurs not showing up and taking a game by the scruff of the neck that they should win pretty handily. And it's a common theme that, again, we'll talk about more today as we discuss Fulham, but until that gets figured out, I will not be surprised at all when Spurs drop points like they did at home on Thursday.
This game was weird for me because you say they didn't take it by the scruff of the neck. I felt like they kind of did in some ways. I mean, there were a ton of chances that were just not put away. If you look at and I know it's your favorite stat to look at, but the XG in this match, Spurs produced 3.74 XG and only scored twice. So like you would think they probably should have had a little bit more from it. Roma's XG was 2.29 and scored twice. So they kind of underperformed theirs slightly, but not nearly as much as Spurs did. Obviously, you get the early penalty drawn by Sarr, which was an obvious penalty, which wasn't called at first, which I thought was very strange. Son converts that. Then Roma equalize. And then the second goal for me was one of my favorites, with Dan Kulusevski hitting a cutback to Brennan Johnson for the second. And then you get the equalizer in stoppage time. What did you think, though, of the 11 in general? Obviously, we know, and I think this is also going to become a grander theme when we talk about Spurs this week, is how depleted they are. Obviously, no Romero, no Van de Ven, so the center back pairing kind of is what it is with Dragusin and Davis. And then the fullbacks in this match as well are, these are the guys you want out there. You've got Pedro Porro, you had Archie Gray out there, kind of doing his best Destiny Udogie impression, but I thought was much more reserved than Udogie would be. He's not the same type of player, so you're going to lack a little bit going forward there. And then Bentancur is obviously playing because he's suspended domestically but can play in Europe. You have the kind of what you would want, though, going forward, and it just felt to me like they weren't able to get as much going offensively, and I think that honestly starts from the back. This team, just because it had its horses up front, it was not able to really get going because it didn't really have the horses at the back.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I look at that lineup, that's as strong of a lineup as we can put out, considering who's available. Again, I'll kind of go back to what I said earlier. Very much a strong enough lineup to beat Roma pretty handily. I think, when we talk about taking a game by the scruff of the neck or taking control, I think our variation in opinion is really just small semantics around how we define that, right? Because for me, that's taking your chances and not squandering opportunities to put the game to bed. When I say take control of a match, I think when you look at the flow of the game or the pace of the game, I do think you're right. I think we did control the game from most aspects of the match, right? But we didn't do enough to win the match and put ourselves in a position to have to scramble at the end to try to hold on to something, and we failed to do that, which again I'm not super surprised by. But yeah, the 11 was good enough to win the match, and like you said, a little bit light at the back, but nothing we can do about that. And I would also say, I know how this sounds, but I don't see a ton of differentiation between how we protect leads with Romero and Van de Ven versus Davies and Dragusin. I don't think there's much differentiation at all there. I think it's a wider problem than just us missing our two center backs. We put City to the sword with Dragusin and Davies on the pitch, right? So it's not as black and white as that for me either.
Well, and it's interesting. I know people will point to like the up and down nature of this team and how it can, like you said, it can go beat City or beat a team like Villa handedly, with depleted sides and then turn around and draw matches at home against Roma and then earlier today Fulham, and just why that is. Like, I think people fully expect this coming week for us to go lose to Bournemouth and defeat Chelsea. Like, that's just kind of the way things will likely play out. And it's certainly possible that happens. For me, the defending has actually been okay from this center back pairing. Like Davis and Dragic, especially from Dragic on the right. Like, when you can play Dragic on the right side as opposed to the left side, and have Davis, who is obviously left-footed, play on the left side, like, these are natural positions for these guys at this point, and they can defend with some quality, even some, I'm not even just going to say Europa League type of quality, I'd say Premier League type of quality. Like, they can do a job there. But for me, it really shows what we're lacking in terms of wanting to play quote unquote Ange ball and going forward with those two guys as the center back spots. Romero and Van de Ven give you so much more ability to open things up and be more dynamic and play out of the back. And then when you throw the fact that Forster's in there instead of Vicario, that actually exemplifies that as well, because Forster is not who you want with the ball at his feet. He's not who you want pinging passes, even if it's just shorter passes to the center backs or fullbacks. That's not what you want. So for me, this defensive setup, and I know the word pragmatism gets thrown out a lot when it comes to Ange. This team has not been playing pragmatically. Like, they haven't. And I don't blame them for not. That's not how Ange wants to play. But with these guys in there, I am seeing a massive difference in what this team is able to do going forward, even though they are producing nearly 4 XG against Roma, but only scoring 2. Like, some of the finishing is not there as well.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Where I was going to go is that it's all on the front. It's all in the front for me, as to where our issues are. We're just not taking our chances. And we had that issue at the beginning of the year when we got off to a really slow start, right? We just weren't taking our chances. And then there was a brief period there where we started to take our chances, and found ourselves kind of climbing back up the table to where we are now in and around the European places. But we're back to not being able to finish. Brennan is popping up with the odd goal, but he's missed plenty of chances. We really missed Solanke today, big time. And not that Dom's been perfect, but we missed him from the perspective of the press and being able to defend from the front for sure today. And I'm just going to say it. Son is quickly, in my opinion, losing that world-class tag, right? I just don't see that from him anymore. And we know he's aging, and I'm not surprised by that, but I haven't seen Son offer much in some time, if I'm being completely honest, right? So he's just dormant and almost non-existent at times. And when you put all that together, it leads to problems. And we've talked about it before, but in Ange's system, if you don't take your chances, you're going to have a tough time getting results. It's just as simple as that. You're going to concede, but you're going to create plenty of chances. And if you don't take them, you're in trouble. The Ange recipe is a good 3-1 win, maybe a 4-2, right? That's how we're going to win matches, but we're not scoring goals. And until that gets addressed, and it really can't be addressed until we can adjust our squad and get guys back to full fitness and full health, which much easier said than done. But until we get all that sorted out up top, we're going to have problems.
Yeah, Sonny came off after 77 minutes in the Roma match. Did have the penalty early, which was taken brilliantly, but obviously there is something lacking there from him right now, and I don't know if that's coming off the back of the international break where he obviously is playing still and doing those kinds of things. But it's really hard to talk about Sonny, isn't it? Like, it's hard to talk about his fitness levels and just the lack of kind of dynamic play from him out on the left. And then obviously he played through the middle against Fulham until late when Kulusevski came on. But in this Roma match, I didn't see a whole heck of a lot out of him. It was everything was more being produced through Brennan Johnson, Dejan Kulusevski, and Solanke, and even from the midfield from Sarr a little bit as well, I thought, in terms of where the offense was coming from. But again, for me, it still just goes back to when you've got Forster, Davis, and Dragic, this team can't get up and go like in the same way that it really wants to on any given day. It doesn't provide the same. And then Archie Gray had something to do with that as well on Thursday, just playing a more, and he had he had a lot to deal with Paulo Dybala too, especially like at least for that first half before Dybala came off. That's a load to handle. Dybala had an assist in this match, and that's a load to handle. So I'm not really blaming Archie Gray, but it was just less dynamic than you would expect or hope for in this match. I do want to take a look at the Europa League in general, because this was super crucial in terms of Spurs' place in the Europa League right now. After this draw, they have fallen down to 9th place on the table. For those still unfamiliar with the Europa League format this year, it's 24 teams that will advance, but that top 8 gets the bye to kind of what is the second knockout round. Every team from 9 through 24 has to play in a separate round in order to get to that spot where the top 8 will be. So being in the top 8 is super, super crucial. Spurs right now, through 5 of their 8 matches, are on 10 points, level with 4 other teams who are all bunched up. One of those teams is Rangers, who happens to be Spurs' next Europa League opponent. So they sit currently 2 goals better in goal difference than Tottenham, so they have a hold of the 8th position. Makes that next game super, super crucial, and a trip to Scotland is on hand for Spurs, and that is a must get a result. I mean, I would say almost must get a win there.
Yeah, I fully agree. We have to win that match. I'm not super confident that happens, if I'm honest, but we have to find a way to get that done. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves very much in the realm of being in the round of 32. And with the way things look right now, I mean, obviously a lot can change, even in a couple weeks' time. But if I had to give a synopsis right this second as to how I think things go if we end up having to play that extra round, we're talking, if we want to go all the way, 9 matches. If I'm not mistaken, once you hit the knockouts, right? If you're in that round of 32, and 9 matches is plenty for us to make mistakes and blunder something along the way with what I'm seeing at this moment in time. So yeah, we really need to get ourselves that bye, especially considering how compact things already are when you play in the English Premier League. Having to not play those 2 matches would be really, really important, and dare I say, could have a massive impact. Maybe even say everything hinges on us not having to play in that round of 32 with the prospect of winning that tournament.
Well, and actually, not to correct you, but it would be 10 matches, wouldn't it? Because it'd be a 2-legged knockout. So you'd end up playing 10, the eight group matches and the 2-legged knockout in the round of 32 just to get to where you could be already by just finishing top 8. So
yeah, I could be wrong, but I'm thinking 9 because the final is only 1 leg.
Oh, well, the final, yeah, but I'm talking about just getting to the round of 16.
Oh yeah.
It's insane. For those who are unaware, that Rangers match comes up December 12th, and then Spurs actually get a little bit of a break from Europa League play until late January, where they will then travel to Hoffenheim. Hoffenheim currently are on the outside looking in barely of the top 24 even, and then they return home for the final match week to play Elfsborg. Now, like, I would love to win the next 2 and make that match against Elfsborg not matter, because it's like secure your top 8. But at this point, if you don't go and win the Rangers match in a couple of weeks, that kind of becomes a tough prospect. So the Europa League campaign, it's not. Look, I mean, Spurs they're gonna be in the top 24 at this point, you would think, without completely falling on their face. But if you want to be in that top 8, give yourself a little bit of a break from Europa League, secure your spot essentially in the round of 16. You really got to go beat Rangers in that next affair, and that will obviously be like that's not going to be an easy environment to waltz into and just grab 3 points. It's going to be a lot of storylines there too, obviously, with Ange returning to Scotland and all of those things. So, and with the health of this club right now, it's one of those things. So. Anything else any other takeaways you have from the Roma match before we kind of specifically dive into what we just saw against Fulham?
No, I don't think there's much else to say. Maybe just mention briefly that we, just showed another example of our deficiency defending in the box with that late goal, right? We seem to be kind of running around with our heads cut off and almost defending in like a panic nature late in matches, right in the box. And between that and the lack of finishing, again, I think we're going to really need to shore things up if we want this season to crumble over the next 4 to 6 weeks as it can do again when you play in the Premier League. So.
And when you have just a completely depleted side, which we saw more of coming into this match against Fulham, because we learned as the lineup came out that Dominic Solanke is just all of a sudden ill and showed up and is not able to go. So more changes afoot as Solanke misses out and Son had to play through the middle. It brought Timo Werner into the side on the left with Brennan Johnson on the right. No Dejan Kulusevski in this starting 11 against Fulham either. He would come on later on in the match, however, and I thought provided a spark, which was much needed. But obviously, you've got to rest some guys sometimes. Dejan Kulusevski cannot play every single minute of every single game. Back to Porro and Udogie on the outside. Basuma and Sarr getting the midfield with Madison, and obviously Bentancur not able to play in this one. And then obviously that same center back pairing and goalkeeper. Fulham, what's the takeaway for you from this one? This one kind of went, honestly, about how I expected as well. Like I would have. This is the more disappointing result of the two for me, honestly. Not that I think that Fulham is a bad team, but like this sucks to again not be able to get one across the line.
Yeah, yesterday in another group chat, somebody had mentioned to me, that Fulham was close to us in the table, and it was important that we get a result today. And they asked the question, could we potentially turn up a bad result tomorrow against Fulham? And I said, my friend, we all know the answer to this question, and It's a resounding yes, that we will most likely turn up and turn in a poor result against Fulham today. Not to say that, I was right or there's any sort of clairvoyance there. I just, the point is that it's very obvious that Spurs are in a vulnerable position in matches that they should win. It's as simple as that. I'm going to keep talking about it over and over and over. It has to be addressed. The fact that we can waltz into the Etihad and beat City in a manner that nobody's beat them in a very long time, and not show up and beat Roma and not show up and beat Fulham at home. It's absolute piss poor mentality. It is all between the ears. I don't care about depth. I don't care about injuries, blah, 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 blah. We were a good enough side to go and win today, and we weren't able to do that. And it's extremely frustrating. We can probably call it there. I don't have much else to say about this one. So.
Well, see, that's actually where I'll push back, because I realized a few minutes ago I said this was the more disappointing result. I meant to say that about Roma. Roma was the more disappointing result. The Fulham result for me is kind of it is what it is situation. And I get all the things you're saying about you got to change the mentality, you got to address why this team turns in what it did against City and then turns around and draws at home to Fulham. I get why that would be confusing. To me, I would say look at the team and also look at the form of the two teams you're discussing. Man City are and I'm not taking anything away from Spurs going to the Etihad and absolutely crushing City in the way that they did. I'm not going to try and downplay what that was, but City are also in a really, really bad way right now. And Fulham are not. Fulham are, I know they did lose last week pretty badly to Wolves 4-1, but prior to that, they had 2 wins and a draw. They are, honestly, they're a point worse than us in the table this season. Like, they are not a bad team. When I looked at their starting 11 today, I said, oh, wow, okay, Fulham actually have some players. And I thought to myself, yeah, I'm not fully expecting the 3 points, but they would be nice. And the way that this match played out for me was, I think, the more disappointing thing, just in the sense that once again, it came down to finishing. I thought the defending was, again, fine. Spurs are learning to adapt to what they have available to them right now. And when you talk about Ben Davis and Radu Dragusin showing up at center back and Fraser Forster showing up in goal, you kind of got to do what you can with that. And I think the fact that you hold Fulham with some of its attacking power to 1 goal in this match, but just aren't able to get more, like this, Tottenham Hotspur should be scoring more than 1 goal at home
exactly.
for me in any match against any team, I think. And I do think that Dominic Solanke missing this match through illness had a big factor in that, because I don't think, and we talked about Son against Roma, Son playing through the middle is not for me. Son needs to be out wide, creating for others, popping in occasionally with some brilliance, but like he's not going to have it all the time. I thought Madison was very good in this game. Madison has been, obviously he tore up Man City. He got dropped against Roma, which is fine. You got to rotate, but like Madison was good in this match, but no one else around Madison was wanting to finish other than the one goal that they obviously did finish on, which was Timo Werner creating for Brennan Johnson, which is like, holy shit. We saw that at the end of the Man City match when that game was over. We saw it again in this match, which I think is great, but you need more than one moment of brilliance in these types of matches. I want to point to XG again. Spurs created 3.74 XG against Roma, as I mentioned, and scored twice. They only created 0.65 XG in this match. They actually got outplayed by Fulham in XG. XG for Fulham was 1.38. So they got outplayed in this match. Like there's no real two ways around it, but still managed to get a point with an extremely depleted side. I'm not going to be humorism. I'm not going to be Ange out. Like I know there's a lot of reaction to this match, and there were even fans booing at the end of this match, which I look, I get you pay for the ticket. You can kind of have whatever reaction you want to, but for me, this was just a product of a depleted team that is playing a ton of games. And this was the first of, I believe it's 9 matches in the month of December. Like buckle in, folks. If you think this was bad, it's probably going to get a little bit worse than this. And the fact that they're able to grit out a point against a pretty decent side when you're this down on your luck and depleted, I don't know. I can take that with a grain of salt and look forward to the week ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always value in having a level-headed approach to these types of results. I'm not saying you're wrong when I say this, but I'm personally just so tired of finding reasons why poor results are okay. I've just been doing it for years.
Sure.
And I can only do it for so long. I think when I look at where Fulham is versus where Spurs are, they're similar in the table in terms of position, but I would argue Fulham is there because of some really not favorable, but just well-earned results that they maybe shouldn't have earned, where Spurs are there because they've dropped points when they shouldn't have, right? So I do think we're the better side, and regardless of injuries, every team in the league is suffering from an injury crisis right now. It's just the nature of world football now. I mean, everybody, Fulham included. So for us to not be able to put them away at home is just something that I'm just not going to be okay with. And we just didn't take our chances. We also obviously missed Solanke, and that's something Ange can't do anything about. I think, and I'm not criticizing him for this decision, but not starting Kulusevski probably cost us points in this match too. I think it's very clear that Kulusevski is just uber important to us progressing the ball. We could not progress the ball at all today. And I think that was just point blank period, because Kulusevski was not on the field to help us progress the ball, which is a problem, right? You cannot depend on one person to do everything. It's similar to the way Arsenal depends on Odegaard. When he's not on the pitch, they're a pretty average side. And I think the same can be said of Kulusevski right now for Spurs. So I think that was, I'm not saying, again, the wrong choice, because I have no idea why that decision was made. It could have been for sure necessary, right? But
I'll tell you right now, the only, and I haven't seen any quotes from Ange on why Kulusevski didn't start, but like you have to imagine it's just the fact that he's played so many damn minutes. Like, totally. Yeah, there's too many damn games. And we talk about this all the time on this podcast, how there's too much football. There's too much domestic football. There's too much European football. I mean, they increased the number of Europa League and Champions League games this year in the group stage by 2. You now play 8 instead of 6. There's too much international football. You know, there's too many. We've already had so many damn international breaks in this season, let alone this calendar year. There's not another international break until March, which says a lot. They've squeezed them all in before the calendar turns to 2025. Yeah. Like, it's too much football. So I understand that Kulusevski needed a blow, and he still ended up playing 25 or so minutes in this match. But it's one of those things that I can get. Now, does the fact that Solanke missed, maybe you try to push Kulusevski even further? I don't know that you risk that, and I don't know where the where the red lines are. And look, we've all had our massive quibbles with Tottenham's, physio staff, and they have not obviously done a great job in terms of keeping players healthy. But I don't know who could with all this football. It's a real problem.
Oh, it's not, like I said, it's not a Spurs problem. It's a world football problem. But I guess in looking at solutions instead of focusing on why things, and not that you're doing this right, but in looking at solutions instead of the issue here, you have to look at James Maddison and say, okay, then if and guys like him. Now, I'm not just pinning this on James Maddison, but the James Maddisons of the world, and say, okay, you've spoken a lot about how you can be the guy. No Dejan Kulusevski today. You're gonna have to step up and be that guy, and I really didn't see it today. I thought Sarr had a poor game as well. I think Sarr was probably at fault for their goal by not keeping tight to his man well enough, and again, probably just another example of the macro, which is the team just scrambling defensively in the box at all times, right, and not being sure of what they're supposed to be doing. But I think the midfield had a rough one today, regardless, and I think I just need guys like Maddison and Sarr to step up if there's no Kulusevski to make things happen, and we didn't see that today. And I know we've got a depth issue. Every team does, because, again, well, we've talked about ad nauseum at this point that there is an overloaded schedule in world football now. That's on the board to continue to build depth, right? I had an interesting conversation this week about Ange out, and I'm certainly not one of those people, right? But it was coming up in conversation again thoroughly this week, and I would say that until the board realizes that the depth has to be immaculate in order to compete at this level, right, which is where we want to be, no manager is going to have success, right? And again, I'm not saying sell the club, and I'm not purple and gold or anything like that, but we have to continue to build depth. We have brought in good pieces this year, which is a whole nother conversation, but these pieces are all teenagers who are certainly for bar Solanke, right? But all teenagers who are for the future and for the Ange project, which means you have to hold on to Ange and you have to let him build up. But that can be true. And at the same time, frustration can be valid in the sense that we're dropping points like we did today. So there's just, obviously, as you can tell, a lot going on and hard to tell up from down at times as to where Spurs problems lie. But ultimately it's going to be on the board and Ange Postecoglou to be able to get that figured out.
Yeah, I thought that Maddison and Sarr actually played pretty well. I mean, Maddison damn near scored on the free kick that he went under the wall.
Yeah, it was a good free kick.
It was a brilliant take and was just barely off of it. I saw reactions online after in the minutes after this match too, really poking at Timo Werner. I think we all know what Timo Werner is at this point, and I'm sure Timo Werner didn't expect that he would have to start today. He fully came into the day, woke up this morning and thought, oh, Son's going to be out on the left, Solanke's on, through the middle, and then Solanke shows up and is sick, and he's pressed into duty, and he ends up with the lone assist that we scored, and it was a great ball to Brennan. To me, if you want to talk about the lack of oomph up front, it in this match specifically, it squarely falls on the shoulders of the captain. And I thought Sonny had a few opportunities in this game that were really, really fluffed, especially early. He had that one that was provided again by Maddison. He had a couple of sitters that he missed. And look, I'm also going to chalk that up to, because it's Son and because we give him the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to chalk that up to fatigue as well and just a lack of touch right now. So all of these guys, and like you said, there's a lot going on at the moment between a lack of depth, injuries, suspensions to players. Everybody's kind of got to pull on the rope in the same direction. And I don't think there's a disconnect here with what these players are going through. I think everyone kind of realizes that everyone's got to be rowing on the same boat. And I don't think there's one aspect of this that's not going in the same direction. I think they're moving forward. They're doing the best they can. And I'm just not, I can't really be down on it. We saw more injuries potentially today with Archie Gray. Archie Gray came on in the 85th minute and then had to depart in stoppage time after getting what appeared to be a dead leg. So unknown on him. I saw a quote from Ange after that said he's not sure about Solanke for Thursday or for Sunday this coming week. So we'll have to see. It's a lot right now. It's a lot, and the games are not going to stop coming. So there's just too much too much to kind of deal with right now, and we're a month out from the transfer window opening. And I get what you're saying about the board. Like, the board needs to provide reinforcements, but also, and I love a but also, so I'm going to add one here. You got to find the right fits, because you cannot just go out, and I know this is what we as fans do. We say, well, we need more depth in the midfield, and we need another center back because Van de Ven and Romero are always seeming to be hurt, and we may need to go, and we're going to have a goalkeeper conversation here in a second as well. Like, we need more up front. But like, you can go buy players, but where do they fit? And are they comfortable with coming in and playing in a limited role? And if they're good enough, why would they be comfortable with coming in and playing in a limited role? Because we need rotation, we need other players, but like Brennan Johnson's really a really good right wing, and he's not even playing every match. We've seen Kulusevski play there. Yeah. Kulusevski needed a blow today. Like, there are options on this team. It's just a matter of putting it all in the right mixture for the right matches.
Yeah, in my opinion, the only way to get good quality depth where like two very equally talented individuals will compete for the one spot is dollars. So that's how the board brings in that type of talent, but the wage structure can't be replaced overnight either. So like, I'm not sitting here saying the board's failing us, any of that. I'm thinking more long-term when I say these things, right? If I want to point to, if you said, Scott, what is the one problem that this team is facing? And I would say that because I'm obviously visibly a little bit more irritated than you are at this point in the project, right? And I don't want to say the project because I fully believe in it, but just say at this point in time, right? I'm more frustrated than you. The one very specific reason why that is we only perform when we're the underdog and we have everything to play for. Like, we can only perform when we have a mountain to climb, and when we're plateaued and the road looks easy in front of us, we just can't perform. And the teams that win the league, that win these trophies that Ange talks about winning, I don't mean to take a jab at him, right? But if we're talking about we win things in our second year, those types of teams show up and say, I don't care if it's fucking Fulham, City, Ipswich, Crystal Palace, I'm playing football today and I'm kicking their ass. And that's just something that this team doesn't have right now. And that's on Ange Postecoglou. I'll say it, for what it is. We have enough talent to be able to win these matches. And we can say, yes, it's on the players and it's on the individual mentality, but the manager's job is to prepare a team to be able to go and perform at the level that they should be performing at. And we're extremely inconsistent right now, and that's our problem. And it's when you look at the big picture where we're at in the table, things are fine, but they could be so much better if we could just show some semblance of consistency, and it's just not there at all. And that's, I think, why I'm so frustrated, because we're good enough to be performing at a much higher level.
I think what you talk about with the project and being, we're not yet 18 months into this, what I think is going to be at least a 3-year project. And I know people will bristle at me saying 3 years, but I think that it'll take 3 full years for Ange to get what he wants in place. And I get that he's talked about winning something in his second season. Guess what? It's there in front of him to win something in his second season. They're not going to win the Premier League. And that's what this match today against Fulham was. It was a Premier League match. You want your position to be good in the Premier League, good enough to keep you in striking distance of being in Europe for next season. I think that would and should be the goal. Right now, they currently sit 7th after this match, after 13 matches, which means they still have a lot of matches to go. Like, we're only, a third of the way into the season approximately. Mm-hmm. They are 3 points out of a European place, and that's 3 points behind both Manchester City and Brighton. So that's kind of where they are. That's fine for me, especially with as depleted as they've been. And then when you look at quote unquote winning something, they'll have a match here in a couple of weeks at home against Manchester City in the League Cup that could put them in a great position to go and win something. And then we talked about earlier about the Europa League, and everything's out in front of them too. That Rangers match is going to go a long way to being, in a better position to win something, but they are in a position to win things in Ange's second season. So like for as bad as it seems and feels especially after a week like this, in which you get two games in which you draw at home and gave up an equalizer, especially the one against Roma being so late in the match, it feels a lot worse than it is for me. That's kind of where I'm at. And I fully feel too that like this could be the beginning of it feeling really bad for a while, just because of what lays ahead. There is a lot of matches coming up and a team that is very depleted, but if they can get to the month of January, and I will be expecting some level of reinforcement, like, don't get me wrong. Like they're going to need to do something in January in order to help. And I don't know where that comes from. It's not my job, but like that is going to be something to do. Like there's going to be work to be done. And I know that we're a month out from it now, so we can actually start to think about it. And I know the club has started to think about it. But that is going to be crucial. It's going to be a big part of what this team is able to accomplish in the micro. But in the macro, I still feel pretty good about where this club is and the direction that it's heading.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with any of that. I'll also say, to piggyback off of that, I'm not irritated. I was almost going to say upset. I'm not even upset, but I'm not irritated today because I have prospects of us winning the league, and these are 2 points dropped towards that happening, right? I've talked about it a lot. I'm very, very, very much agnostic about what happens in the Premier League this season, right? But I just
they're all free hits, I think you've said.
Exactly. And honestly, as much as I'm like semi-joking when I say that, I do truly believe that whatever happens in the league is whatever happens. And I'm not going to sweat it, right? I start to worry more so about the trend of these dropped points, right? If this was just in a vacuum, and tough one today against Fulham, like whatever, but we're just consistently dropping points that we should not be dropping all season long, right? And that's where my irritation and frustration drops from or pulls from. But I also look, like you said, the League Cup, every chance I think we can go win that. And frankly, we're going to be up for those matches because, not only were we an underdog in the sense of we don't win things and we're Spursy, right? But those 1-game matches are much easier to turn up for mentally and fight for, right? And again, that's probably a problem in itself that we can't do that for 38 weeks in the Premier League if we want to win it. But in these cup matches, I do suspect us to be more up for them. A little bit concerning that we dropped points against Galatasaray and Roma in that sense too, but plenty of reason to think we'll get through if we can just take the right mentality into these cup matches. So I think that'll be there. And again, I think, like you said, Ange has every prospect of winning a trophy this year. Can very much happen. But the more I see us drop points like we did today, the more I think that there's, a deeper rooted issue that could pop up and rear its head in these cup matches too. And that's maybe a big part of my concern as well.
I want to get to some of the reaction that we had on social media following this Fulham match. Dustin reaches out and says, we got to keep the faith. This is a work in progress. And even in a season with injury and depth issues, we still have the second best goal difference. Hopefully the table starts to reflect that soon. And if not, don't panic. That's kind of where I'm at as well. I just feel like this is the grind. I mean, you just mentioned it. It's a 38-game grind. A Premier League season is long and arduous. And when you throw in all of the other matches between Europe, I mean, we knew this was going to be a hard, long season with more games and not a lot of depth. And when you factor in all the injuries and suspensions and illnesses, I mean, I pray, and I'm not the praying type, but I pray that Dominic Solanke doesn't have whatever the hell Mikey Moore has illness-wise, because Mikey Moore has just disappeared. And that's been really tough to watch as well. But like this team just keeps getting hit in the gut with a number of different things, and they've just got to show resiliency through it. Our guy Austin says injuries in 2 games a week are stretching us thin, and asks if we think we get any reinforcements this January. I sure as hell hope so. Like that's where my mindset. If I'm in Tottenham's front office right now, I'm thinking, what do we do to stem this tide until we get the likes of Forster, Van de Ven healthy, Romero healthy, Bentancur back from his suspension, obviously, which will come at toward the end of the month. Like there needs to be reinforcements. We'll find out more about Archie Gray, obviously, but there's just so damn much. Benzo says the same thing. We're doing great with a very thin squad right now. Are there some realistic January signings you think we'll make? I think so. Like I don't know who they are. That's more honestly more your territory and probably Dakota's territory in terms
of
talk
about that. Yeah,
scouting.
Yeah.
There'll be time. We still got a couple weeks, but there'll be time for sure. But like that's kind of where we are. Here's perspective from a different one. This is from Tom Payne on Blue Sky. We aren't physically or mentally conditioned to play in the second half. Hold us in the first and just play for a win or tie in the second. Horrendous passing. We are a mid-table team. That's where I'll push back. We're not a mid-table team. We currently sit 7th, which I guess you could kind of say is mid-table, but I don't really think that's mid-table. They're knocking on the door of being in the European places despite where they're at. Fulham are decidedly mid-table. They sit 10th after this result.
Yeah, I agree with everything that person said up until we're a mid-table team. I think throwing out we're a mid-table team is a grievance that we see from people who are just pissed, right? It's a euphemism for just a shit side, right? Which we're not. But I agree with everything else that person said in terms of mentality, and he has it bang on. Hold us in the first half, and from minute 70 to 90 you're going to feast, and we're going to scramble, and you have a really good chance of finding a goal, right? So that right there is, again, the mentality that I've talked about the whole episode is where we're really hurting right now.
I just read this tweet as well, it's a tweet. We're seeing, by the way, we are on Twitter, Blue Sky, at Tottenham Depot, and all places. I'm seeing a lot more of the trend toward Blue Sky, though, from the interaction from the listeners, so shout out to them. But Jack Pitt-Brook of the Athletic, he's still with the Athletic, right? Yeah, of the Athletic. Yeah. Tottenham had 7 substitutes today who had never started a Premier League game. That's Brandon Austin, Lucas Bergvall, Jed Spence, Archie Gray, Will Langshire, Williams Barnett, and Alusi. The only two who had were Kulusevski, who obviously came on, and the other one, and we didn't even mention this, Sergio Reguilon, who has last played for Spurs in April of 2022. Sergio Reguilon was on the bench today. That is how depleted this side is. A player who
hasn't played 2.5 years for Tottenham. That's insane.
Has not started for Tottenham in 2.5 years. I can't even remember the last time he played, but like that's a guy who has not been in our thoughts at all, and he was on the bench today, which was a real shocker.
No, and again, that stuff is really important right there. I think I was personally frustrated when he took Maddison off for Bergvall. I understand why that had to happen. Matters has played a ton of minutes too, and you don't have any other options. I told my wife there's absolutely nothing that Bergvall offers in this moment, in my opinion. And that's not a shot at Bergvall. He's 18 years old, and he comes from the Swedish league. And people talk about these high expectations for him. So I'll pause on him for a second because I think out of fairness to him, I have to, right? You come from the Swedish league, which is probably comparable to like the top of the League One table, potentially. If I have to say off the top of my head, right? And we expect him to come in and just walk right into the Premier League because he was linked to Barcelona. This kid's 18 years old. He needs a loan desperately, in my opinion. He has to get acclimated to English football because he looks just absolutely lost when he's on the pitch, right? He's in the wrong position today even, right? Was not where he needed to be at any given time. And I probably pick on him because I was watching him because I was upset that he came on for Maddison, right? But all this to say, it's a depth problem, like you're saying, right? When you have to bring Bergvall on for Maddison, no way Ange looks and says, I need to win this match, better take Maddison off, right? That was a necessity for whatever reason, and it's a depth problem, which I totally understand. And I appreciate that perspective as well. But again, my point is Bergvall coming on from Maddison when you really need a goal tells you everything you need to know about where the squad is.
Well, I've heard this take from you, and I don't really fully agree with it, but I get it. Like the Bergvall thing for me, there is something to be said for young players, whether it's Bergvall, whether it's Archie Gray, even Pap Sarr to an extent. Like these guys didn't go elsewhere because they're learning Ange ball, and that's a big part of it for me too, is being on the training pitch all the time. And even though you're not getting maybe the minutes in games that you would like, I mean, we've seen moments from Bergvall that look really brilliant this season. We've also seen him get way less playing time than I think we're accustomed to a player that is like right on the bench and right on the cusp of being in the starting 11 get. But to that point, like I think he's going to grow into it as the season goes along. I hope he does. If he doesn't, maybe there is a discussion to be had, but
I think my only thing there is like, I look at a guy like Archie Gray, who's the same age, right? Archie Gray comes from a situation where he played almost every minute in the championship. And that's why he's doing really well right now, is because
he's been playing grown man football, but he's also getting about the same amount of minutes as Bergvall has. Like he has not been playing a ton.
I think he's probably gotten a little bit more. I mean, he's played full matches where Bergvall hasn't. But I think where I see the differentiation between the two is Archie Gray is showing that he's capable of playing within this squad, and Bergvall is not. And why I say Bergvall needs a loan is if this goes on for an entire season and the summer rolls around and still nothing is starting to show, I just worry about his confidence. I look at his reaction to being subbed off when Dragoshin got the red card in the first match of the Europa League. And I'm not picking on him at all. Like I'm hesitant to even say this because I don't want it to bleed into like mental health and happiness and stuff. I think that's really important to be very fragile around, right? But his reaction was just, he was absolutely distraught and really visibly upset. And that just tells me that he's 18 years old and there's just an element of maturity that's not quite there yet. And that's where I say, like, if this season goes on and he still just keeps dropping dud after dud after dud when he gets opportunities, I just worry that he's going to lose belief in himself and faith in himself. And that's a very dangerous place for a young footballer to be, especially these young guys who get these massive moves. Like, let's just call it what it is. If you're 18 years old and Barcelona wants you and Spurs want you, and all of a sudden you're playing in preseason, you're starting to think like, I might be a pretty good footballer, right? I might be pretty talented. And an 18-year-old, when I was 18, I thought I was hot shit, right? I learned quickly that I wasn't. But for an 18-year-old, I just think it's a very dangerous place to be, to like ride this massive high and then absolutely fall off a cliff and find yourself asking what happens next, right? And that's where I say, like, we've got to find a way to get this guy in a situation where he can be playing impactful, meaningful football to whatever squad he's playing for. And that's where a loan comes in for me. But again, what you're saying, you know, if that proves to be true and comes to fruition, then that's a wonderful thing too. I wouldn't have any issues there.
I looked it up just to, you know, just to put a bow on it. And you're right. Archie Gray has played more than Lucas Bergvall, but only 2 more starts and the same number of appearances. This is entering today against Fulham. Both have appeared in 12 matches. Gray's started 7, Bergvall started 5. Gray's played 676 minutes to Bergvall's 338. But honestly, like, when you look at some of the other names on the list of just like limited minutes, it's all due to injury, illness, suspension, the whatever else you want to say. So it's a mash unit right now, and that's kind of the unfortunate part. Speaking of mash unit, we haven't really fully addressed the big elephant in the room, and that's Guglielmo Vicario, fractured ankle. Just insane to learn about this week after the Man City match, and then Fraser Forster starts 2 matches. I'm going to start by asking you this: how much faith do you have in Fraser Forster just being this team's starting goalkeeper until Vicario can come back? Do you think that that's a viable option?
I do, actually. I think our issues defensively are not at the goalkeeper position. I think it's much deeper than that. I think, again, it's our spatial awareness in the box. If I had to put it on one thing, it's not the goalkeeper position. I think Fraser's been fine. I think he made some really nice saves today. He's also just a very mature guy who appears to be really a glue in the locker room and somebody that everybody looks to for guidance and respect and all of that. So I have no issues with Fraser getting us back to a fully fit Vicario. I would also say, in terms of the outrage that I saw on social media around this, you know, around Fraser being our starting keeper, every one of those people was slating Vicario up and down the pitch, you know, a week prior to him getting injured. Fair enough. But there's plenty of people.
That's me. I'm going to come to it. So, like, this is the way I would address that. I've been look, on the podcast here, I've probably been the most critical of Guglielmo Vicario. And that's not to say I think he's a bad goalkeeper. I think that there are moments when he shows he ain't a long-term option. And I don't even think I don't even know that that's true for sure. It's just, he's still growing into this team, just like a number of young players are. And I say young, he's young for a goalkeeper, right? He's 28, I think it is at this point. Forster's a much steady your hand in terms of his veteran presence, but I don't think that he's certainly not a step up from Vicario. I'm definitely not. I don't have the faith in Forster that you do. And it's kind of a little bit of what I spoke about earlier. It's not so much the shot stopping. It's not so much the actual being the positioning things, the being a goalkeeper things. It's more about going forward. I think that the Vicario gives us a lot more ability going forward because I think he's better with the ball at his feet. I think he's better slightly better in distribution. I do think this is an issue, and I'm curious. I know a lot of people are ready for January to see. I know there were a lot of people even talking about just signing a free agent immediately. Like I think, Navas I think came up multiple times this week, which I think is crazy. But I'm really interested to see if Spurs do anything in January, whether it's just because they also have Austin and Whiteman who are just like Statler and Waldorf, like hanging out at Tottenham for however long they've been there. I mean, it's been forever, and those guys just don't see the pitch. God forbid something happened to Fraser Forster in the next handful of months, and one of those guys has to see the pitch. But for me, this is it's precarious, and I'm curious as to what they will do in January, if anything. Do you think they should try to sign someone in January, just even if it's to back up Forster? I mean, I know we talked earlier about when you sign a player, it's got to be the right moment for them as well as you, but like, I don't know if that name is out there.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I'd love to have someone come in for Fraser, and when I say like I'm not concerned. Sure, I'm concerned, but I'm not like in panic mode about this, right? I think that the goalkeeper tends to be one of those positions where you need somebody who can be serviceable, and I think we've got that. I think if the team in front of them is sound, things should be fine, right? It's not great though, and I'm not going to try to pretend that it is either. That being said, I'd love to have someone come in. I don't know who that would be. There's no way anyone who is more talented than Fraser is going to be willing to come in and play for 6 weeks and then never play again. That's not going to happen, right?
Right.
I think it's probably one of those situations where this is just an absolute worst case scenario for the club, because with all the injuries going on and the fixture list, if I'm Ange, of course the question maybe pops up: what happens if Vicario goes down? And you say, just don't think about that. That's not going to happen. We're going to be.
You can't think about it that way. Exactly. But it's honestly, it's scary. It's scary that we've gotten to a point with Spurs where we almost have to, just because of all of these different things that have happened this season. Like this has not been far off from what happened in the Chelsea match in Ange's first season. Like between suspensions, injuries, just tomfoolery. Like it's been that bad, and yet this is why I continue to beat the drum of, look at where this team is. Look at it from I mean, there is so much. I know I say this a lot on this podcast, but like, just don't go on the internet. Don't go there. It's a bad place. There's so much doomerism. There's so much, not only Ange out stuff, but like our fans are bad too, which maybe I actually agree with some of that. Like, I don't get the booing stuff. The stadium atmosphere apparently was quite bad today. If you're not going to the stadium to have a fun time and enjoy yourself and relying so much on the result, maybe give that ticket to someone who's going to enjoy themselves. Because my goodness, like, that was, hearing the booing today for me was like, what are we doing here? It was a little confusing.
I will say we have a history, especially lately as a club, not really lately, the entire ENIC tenure, if you really look at it, of making rash decisions and sacking managers who shouldn't be sacked. And I think the fans do play a part in that. I think when the entire stadium boos and makes it well known that they're not, that I don't want to say they're not behind the manager, but they're growing increasingly more towards not being behind the manager, that's something the club has to consider, and it does factor in, right? I look back to sacking Harry Redknapp and that terrible decision, right? And it's just been a string of poor decisions since then, if I'm being completely honest. And I do think the fans have a part to play in that. And so, it's a dangerous game that we're playing when we start booing Ange Postecoglou in a situation where, like you said, he's been here for 18 months and is honestly trying to fix a very broken club. is all he's trying to do. And you know, fans don't need to be making his job more difficult than it already is. He's got a mountain to climb. So let's not throw boulders in the way of that climb in you know, the form of fans just being shitty. I'll leave it at that.
No question. One more note that I was not able to remember to squeeze in when we were talking about Fulham, but did you know that Ryan Sessegnon played more minutes at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium today than he did in his final 18 months when he was a Spurs player? Because that is an absolute insane stat. Came on and played 13 minutes in this draw for Fulham and only played 8 in his last 18 minutes for Spurs at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. That is shout out to Owen THFC _ on Twitter for that stat. That is mind blowing, but goes to the availability being your best ability sometimes that I always kind of try to tout. So that is really tough. It's not going to get any easier for Spurs this week. They travel to the South Coast to face Bournemouth on Thursday in a Premier League match and then return home Sunday for a big old clash with Chelsea. That's gonna be a really, really important match. Like, not that the Bournemouth match is not important, but boy, you got a chance to take something from Chelsea, a team that is ahead of you and looking way better than I think anyone maybe expected it would this season. That is really, really something. Talk about a team that has the bodies to go around and the depth to go around. They signed every single possible player possible. That really says something there too. So Spurs women will also be returning to action next week. They play at home against Everton on Sunday as well. So we will be back with you all to chat about those matches. And I'm sure hopefully not, but I'm sure more injury news and more transfer rumors as we barrel through the month of December and head toward January. Scott, thanks so much for hopping on with me and doing the 2-man weave with me today on the pod today. He is at Scott G. Bird. You can follow me at A. Stetka. And again, follow us at Tottenham Depot on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, all the different places. And be sure to check out our episodes on the YouTube page as well, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. For Scott, I have been your host, Andrew. This has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. As always, come on, you Spurs.